What's happening, everybody? Thanks for tuning in to the Crash Bang Boom Drumming Podcast. Today's guest is drummer Matt Halpern, better known for his playing with his band Periphery, and who also has his own sample company, which you can check out at getgooddrums.com. And he's also an instructor, clinician, and more. But Matt and I caught up when he had some downtime following Periphery's most recent tour in support of their new album, Hail Stan, where he was a little under the weather, but despite that, we were able to talk about all of his side hustles, acclimating to touring in both starting the tour and returning home, the writing, demoing, and general pre-production process that goes into the Periphery records, which was pretty impressive, words of wisdom from his early teachers, Matt's playing with animals as leaders, and his work with guitarist producer Misha Mansoor's studio and drumming programming savvy, and a whole lot more. Crash Bang Boom Podcast can be found on iTunes, SoundCloud, YouTube, Stitcher, Luminary, Podbean, Google Play, and more. So feel free to check out any of the previous 170 episodes, and please give me a like, a share, a subscription, and or a positive review. Any and all of the support is appreciated. Shout out to my sponsor, New Orleans Record Press. If you're looking to put out vinyl for your project or projects, check out NewOrleansRecordPress.com to peruse vinyl coloring, packaging, mastering, electroplating, and more options, and you can add it all up in the real-time quote generator. They have a faster turnaround than most in the industry, and if you're interested, tell them Crash Bang Boom sent you. From 12 to 7-inch records in either 150 or 180 gram variants, they got you covered. And that's NewOrleansRecordPress.com. So here we go. Matt Halpern, Periphery, Get Good Drums. We're going to get it. Crash, bang, boom.
Crowds go mad with joy.
Yeah! All right, I'm here with Matt Halpern of Periphery. What's happening, man? How you doing?
I'm good, man. I'm just getting acclimated to being back home after this last tour, which was awesome, actually. So it was a good transition from an awesome tour to now being home, which is equally as awesome in a different way.
I hear you, man. How did that run go? And how long were y'all out for? A couple weeks, I guess it was?
Yeah, we were out it was all in about 2.5 weeks on the road. I think it was 14 shows during that period of time. So we had like a few days off sprinkled in there. But it was great. It was one of the best U.S. tours we've ever done. The shows were killer. The crowds were killer. We had a great crew. We were touring with really cool bands. We were touring with our good friends in Pliny and Arch Echo, and the vibe was just so easy and so chill. Everybody laughed. Everybody got along really well. So it was definitely one for the books, man. It was one of our favorite tours, I think, collectively as a band in our whole career. It was great.
You know, I admire your hustle on the road and Periphery's general, DIY ethos. But tell me a little bit about coordinating drum lessons on the road and how and where you're able to make that work while you're amidst a tour.
Sure. So I've been doing that. That really dates back to one of actually our first tour since I was in the band in 2009.
Wow.
I've been teaching. I've been teaching at the venues since then. It started off that long ago as sort of an experiment to see if I could do it. And it just became something that I truly fell in love with doing each day. And I've been doing it ever since. So funny enough, at this point, the promoters, the venues, the places we go are actually really familiar with it, with me in particular. So they kind of come to expect it when they see that we're coming through. Oftentimes our tour manager or even the booking agent gets asked, "Oh, is Matt going to be teaching again?"
Right.
So it's pretty straightforward. So I do it every day, typically around 3:00. I try to time it directly after sound check. So I get a little bit of a warm up there. And then depending on the venue and depending on the weather, I either teach inside the venue or I actually set up in our bus trailer. The groups typically range, I would say, from like 5 to 15 students per class. And luckily enough, our trailer is big enough that I can actually house all of the students, even in the bigger class, all in there together. So
wow,
I try to do it outside that way because it's less invasive to the venue, and the bands that are sound checking after us can make noise, and we don't have to I guess I don't want to say invade anyone's space, but it's a lot easier, and it gives me a lot more time typically to go longer, especially with a larger class. So although I advertise them as minimum an hour, I'm pretty sure that every class this tour was at least an hour and a half, and some of them ran, even over 2 hours. So it's great, man. It's a fantastic way for me to get to know the fans and the students. I have students that have been coming back now for years. I mean, I had people in my last class in New York on this tour that have been coming to see me for classes, either, when I used to teach online or even in person. Now for like the past 6 or 7 years, they're coming back.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, I've built really good actual relationships and friendships with the students. I hope I've been able to genuinely help them. I would assume I have been, since a lot of them come back.
Uh-huh.
But dude, I've been pitching this kind of thing to a lot of people for a long time because, from the fan/student perspective, it's a great way for them to learn from somebody they actually are excited to learn from, hopefully. It's a great experience to add to the show. It's an extra experience on top of just going and seeing a band that they like. And, they get to meet other drummers in their area. They get to just have a different take on what a drum lesson typically might be perceived as, and then for me,
Right.
as the guy teaching the class, it's a great way to expand my audience, to get to know my fan base really, really directly. It's a great way for me to fill a lot of potential downtime that otherwise would be used for Lord knows what on tour.
Yep.
It's a fantastic way for any artist who's touring to supplement their income, because it is very hard to make a living as a touring musician by itself.
Yeah.
So there's just no downside to it, man. And that's why I've been doing it for so long, because it's genuinely enjoyable and it's something I look forward to every day. So yeah, I know that was a long-winded answer, but yeah, it's great, man. I've been doing it for a while and I don't foresee not doing it ever. As long as I can offer the classes on the tour, I will do it for sure.
That's awesome, man. Well, tell me a little bit about the drum recording of Hail Stan, which to my ear sounds maybe a little darker than some of its predecessors, but was it an especially challenging in nailing some of your parts for it? Because I'd say you have a pretty good history of playing some pretty intricate drum orchestrations, and in addition to that, oftentimes do subsequent drum playthrough videos. So I would imagine in that instance, fills could potentially be memorized at that point. So
yeah,
it seems like it's a multi-level process of it all, but was there any particular process within this record that was particularly challenging?
Yeah, I mean, the whole album was a challenge for sure. The record's aggressive. There really isn't, I don't think, any one particular theme throughout it. It kind of runs the gamut of different styles and different feels and different energy. So just getting in the right mindset for every song. I have a pretty good process that I've sort of become accustomed to when it comes to learning and writing the drum parts for the record. Luckily, for every record we record, at least as of the past few, I have a lot of time to get familiar with the parts and, develop the little nuances that are there and kind of figure out what parts need to be, played verbatim to how we program them versus which parts can be improvised.
Uh-huh.
So in that sense, I went into it really having everything mapped out, and I was really prepared and really ready, and it was good. I think the biggest difference, though, for this record, what it was that it was the first record that we recorded using Pearl drums, which now I'm endorsing.
Nice.
Or rather, I'm an endorsee of the brand, and that was the first record where we used their drum set. We I always try to pick and choose the drums, the sizes, the sounds, the overall setup based on the vibe of the record.
Mm-hmm.
And this record was dark, it was big, it was aggressive. So I went for larger sizes. I went for more aggressive cymbal choices. I went for more aggressive snare drum choices. Me and Nolly, who's our former bandmate, who's also typically our lead producer for the records, we record together all the time. He's my co-founder of Get Good Drums, which is our sample company. So, we go into these recordings for, the albums with a pretty clear idea of what we're going for. He knows how to get the right sounds out of the drums. I know how to hit the drums. So it was a cool process, man. And with anything that the band does, we try to just capture a vibe. And I think, if I'm thinking back to that recording, there was a lot going on in my life around that time. And I think it was pretty chaotic in a good way, but my life was definitely chaotic. I was about to get married. I was going through a bunch of like other business stuff. There was a whole lot going on. And I think it coincided perfectly with the vibe of the album, because there's definitely some chaos on that record, and I hope it captured it. But
Right.
yeah, it was a very cool experience. And as always with recording records with Periphery, the guys in my band write crazy music. It forces me to come up with drum parts that I can't play at the time. And then it forces me to learn those parts and get better as a drummer. So I'm always grateful for those opportunities, because I think recording records are definitely one of the biggest moments in time that forced me to truly develop skills and abilities that I didn't know that I had, if that makes sense.
Right. Yeah. It's funny, man. I was listening to the opening song off Hailstand, Reptile, which is clocking in about 17 minutes. And I mean, I walked my dog. I went about 3 or 4 blocks to the wine store, chose a bottle of wine, walked the dog back, and the song was still on. It was like, holy shit, what an epic damn song. So I imagine with my own attention deficit issues, I'm trying to wrap my head around executing. I mean, I can't imagine that were you able to get close to a single take throughout that entire thing? I mean, that's a long song.
No, and we don't record any song. You're right. I mean, very, very true. No, we don't record any song in a single take. In fact, there's a lot of quality control that we sort of apply to every song that we record, in that we want to make sure the drums remain in tune. We want to make sure that everything is just exactly where we want it to be in terms of positioning. Right. So our process is actually very, very specific, where I really take every song, that song included, section by section. So it can be like 8 bars, it can be 16 bars, it can be 32 bars, but I do it section by section. I'll record one take, stop, we'll retune, I'll do another take, stop, I'll retune. That gives me a chance to kind of get typically it's like 5 takes. I'll do the first 3 exactly the same way and just have options for sound quality purposes. And then I'll do 2 more takes with slight variations, just in case we want to have something, that it's like a momentary moment of genius, for lack of a better word, that might strike me, which it rarely does. But in that rare case that I get, I pull off something that is inspiring in the moment, we have the option to record that. And then after we do about 5 takes of each section, we finish the song, which can take I think that song took easily 3 hours to record, but it's because we took so long to do it. And then we comp it together. We pick the best parts from each section, we tie it together, and then we build a song that I then ultimately have to go learn from that perspective. Right. To then play it live. But again, I mean, that's why it's such a great learning process, because I'm learning the parts that I write, we're recording in sections, then we're comping together a final version, and then I'm learning the orchestration of that version and the arrangement of that version.
Yeah, another good thing I would imagine by going part to part. And I mean, y'all's tempo seem to be fairly solid. It's not super, super drastic tempo changes to the extent where you would have to tempo map the hell out of a song. But I think that is one way of doing, in those instances, I think it's better to either do that or just not even do it with a tempo map. Because in my experiences, when I've done that, it often sounds, at least when the parts are butted up against each other, so to speak, it often sounds very obviously kind of tempo mapped. So that's something that I've been trying to figure out in my own head. But it would make more sense, I think, in that instance to kind of go part by part like you're talking about.
Yeah, and funny enough, we did that for P2. We slowed down sections by like 2 to 3 BPM, and it was a nightmare.
It's a total nightmare.
Yeah, it was a nightmare trying to, because then you got to map it for live, because we use a click track live for the songs. Right. Mapping those songs really was just not fun. And even with this record, there's one song in particular, Church Burner, at the very end, there's sort of there's like a slowdown part with the last fill that leads to like a big rock and roll kind of ending, or at least our interpretation of said kind of ending. And we had to map that out, and we do it live too. It's mapped out with a click, and it's just, I'm used to it now. but it was definitely a pain in the ass trying to figure that out. That's for sure.
I guarantee it.
Yeah.
And I guess going back to some of the drum parts, it sounds like it's a multi sort of step system. But from my understanding, it sounds like a lot of y'all are everyone's obviously pretty computer literate. There's a lot of demo and there's a lot of sort of electronic versions of this stuff leading into it and sequence drums and whatnot. So I guess at times, are there sequence drums that ultimately influence what your actual drum part becomes?
Yeah. I mean, that's how I got involved in starting a drum sample company, because we, for years and years and years, I mean, since the beginning of the band, even before Misha, who was the founder of the band, had bandmates, he was programming drums for the demos that he was writing. When I joined the band, nothing was different in that sense. We essentially write all the drum parts using drum programming so that we can then demo things out as close to what the record's going to be as possible. And even to the point of where, like, it could be a week before, and meaning a week before I go and record the drums, and I'll have a new idea. I'll call Misha and say, hey man, here's this new idea. I'll beatbox it to him. We'll reprogram it so everybody can hear it and everybody can sign off on that part.
Right.
Basically here's the long version short is somebody in the band writes a riff and they'll program a very basic drum part just to show how it's supposed to be felt, what the interpretation is, what's the intention, how do you bob your head to it.
Right. And
then from there, if that part's going to stick, I'll start memorizing the melodies and thinking about the music and then developing my own version of that part that remains true to the feel that whoever wrote that riff is going for. And I'll develop the part, just by usually tapping it on my steering wheel or tapping it on a desk. And then I'll get together with Misha and we'll actually program the ideas that I've fleshed out in my head. And we'll get it programmed so everybody can hear it. And then it's just an iterative process from there as I get to the drum set and actually start to learn the parts that I've written with Misha on programming. We make little changes and we kind of hone it in so that by the time that I'm going into the studio, not only have I completely mastered and memorized, hopefully, those parts, but we've programmed them in so that by the time that I'm recording the record with live drums, the parts are pretty much verbatim. They're there.
Wow.
Yeah. They do it with the guitars too. We record all the guitar parts for the demos, get them perfect, and then re-record everything for the album, just like we do with drum programming. We program the drums to get them as perfect as possible. Then we re-record them with live drums.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a hell of a process.
It is a process. But, that's part of the reason why we wanted to start our own record label, so that we could take as much time as we needed. We wouldn't have to answer to anybody, and we could make decisions like calling the record Hail Stan, and nobody could tell us that it's a dumb idea,
Right, exactly. Yeah, I mean, that's another aspect of recording this record that differs from the previous ones and what you just mentioned. And I would imagine that, yes, being able to make your own calls on that has to be, I would imagine, a breath of fresh air and maybe a little less pressure during the recording process itself, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we always had a great relationship with our former label. It was never about that. I think just in general, we have a very DIY sort of mentality with the band. And that's something that we wanted to do for a very long time, was to be able to release our own music, control how it goes out, control the budgets, control how much time we spend on it, what we call it, what it looks like, what it sounds like. If we want to put out a single, if we want to put out an EP, if we want to put out 2 songs, if we want to put out 20 songs, if we want to sign other bands or release our other projects, we can do that. So it's just a means for us to release music that we are really passionate about, whether it's stuff that we're writing ourselves, it's stuff that we're releasing as Periphery, or it's a way for us to promote other artists and other bands that we really like and have the ability to give control to that artist as well. Like we get asked this a lot in so many words, but like, our goal is not to make money with this record label per se. Our goal is to be able to have complete creative control and creative freedom, and to then give other artists that we are really stoked about the chance to have that sort of creative control too, without having people breathing down their necks.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it was the almost seemingly logical next step for a band that I mentioned, and you as well mentioned this sort of DIY history of the band and your ability to record. And I think between Misha's engineering and production savvy and everyone in the band having computer savvy and the whole process that you just mentioned, now to then also have your own record label, it's just that much more control over your own product, which once again, congrats that you're able to even do that.
Thanks, man. Yeah, I mean, we barely spend any money on making a record. It's pretty insane. So rather than have to worry about somebody else's budget, we can just say, hey, like, how much do we really need? Well, oh, cool. We can do it for like less than 10 grand. Fuck yeah,
Right.
let's do it. And let's not spend a dime more than we have to because we don't need to. And that just speaks to the the amazing skills that my bandmates have. These guys are so smart and so good at what they do. And, we're lucky. I'm lucky to be a part of a band that has that ability because those guys have put in a ton of work.
Right.
And I respect the shit out of them to be able to do it. And then now for us to benefit from all their hard work is really special. So it's very cool.
Well, as far as your history with Misha, did he do all the drum programming on the first Animals as Leaders record? So that's not an actual drummer on that. That's his drum programming and everything, I believe,
Yeah,
right?
that's correct. Yeah, it's funny, man. That's an interesting story, which I can tell you really briefly. But
Sure, go for it.
So at least this is how I've heard it from him. But prior to him doing the drums for that record, like a week before, was the first time that I met Misha. He came out with the former guitar player of Periphery, who was a good friend of mine named Alex Boyce. They came out to see me play with a pop band. And they saw me play, and Misha says to Alex, shit, man, if we ever lose our drummer, this is our guy.
Wow.
And Alex is like, what, really? And I agree with Alex because I was literally playing like, 2/4 beats on a tiny little drum set, playing dumb pop music with some friends, like stuff that we wrote. I love pop music, but like this stuff was very just like kind of off the cuff and just kind of a fun little side project. So Misha calls me like 2 weeks later or 3 weeks later, and he's like, hey man, it's Misha. I'm working on this album with my friend Tosin, and I've been programming the drum parts based off of the way you played when I saw you. You inspired me to write these parts. I think you should audition for this band. And I was like, oh, cool. Well, thanks for thinking of me. Sure, send me the music. And then he sends me a bunch of the demos from that Animals as Leaders record. And I'm like, dude, fuck off. There's no way I can play this shit. I don't, no way. But then, then I listened to it more and I tried, and I actually had a knack for it and a grasp of it. And I went down and I auditioned with Tosin and Javier, and Misha actually was there too. And I ended up getting the job, and I was in Animals as Leaders for about 6 months maybe before the band at that time took a hiatus. And then literally like that week, Travis, who was the former drummer, amazing drummer from Periphery before me, left the band. Misha calls me. He's like, dude, you want to come play shows with us? And I was like, yep. And I've been here ever since. So that's the short story that that stems from what you mentioned about that first Animals as Leaders record and Misha programming the parts.
Right. It's interesting too, because he had a certain perspective of what you were playing. Then you hear, according to him, how he interpreted your playing in the form of programmed drums. And then I think you were also informed as to how he sort of created programmed drums. So that was your first experience kind of hearing the craziness of it all as well.
Yeah. And I mean, it was very obvious that he and I had a very good chemistry. I've always respected the shit out of him. And man, he is an amazing writer across all instruments, but man, that guy has such a great mind for drumming. So I always love hearing his interpretations of parts. He loves hearing mine. And together it's like we could sit there all day and trade ideas and be happy either direction, So to this day, we have such a great chemistry as a team write drums together. And it's cool to think back and like look at where it started, and that's where it started, obviously. And it opened up a whole new world for me. It opened up a whole new way for me to think about writing drum parts, and a new process that we still use to this day. And then for him, you know, we've been bouncing ideas off each other since 2008 or so. So
wow.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
That's great, man.
Yeah.
One of my previous interviews was JP Bouvet, who mentioned his crash course in learning Periphery songs to sub for you.
Yeah.
What did you think of his ability to jump in on those songs and play a show or whatever that was? Because from what I saw, it sounded pretty killer.
I had no doubt, man. I mean, JP's a really good friend of mine. My dad was going through some health issues on that tour, sort of unexpectedly. So I had to fly back and forth. And you know, it's funny. I'm the only one in the band where if I can't play and we can't get a fill in, we have to cancel shows. And that really wasn't an option. So I called JP because I had no doubt. I had no doubt that he could learn the songs. I had no doubt that he would, you know, do them justice. I had no doubt that he would take it seriously. I was just worried that he wouldn't be available because, man, he's so busy. He's such a great drummer. He's so active as a teacher, as a performer, as you know, an educator with his own business. I didn't know if he'd be available, but it worked out. And yeah, dude, I know he has a learning process. He showed the world how he did it, and I love it, man. He saved my ass. He saved the band's ass. I owe him a ton for helping out on that tour. And like I said, he's one of my favorite drummers in the world. He is one of the most mature and philosophical, well thought out drummers when it comes to everything he does on the instrument, whether it's writing music or soloing. It's kind of ridiculous because, dude, his vocabulary is endless. What he's capable of doing is endless. But what's so great about JP is that he truly understands his role in each different scenario and knows what tools to bring to the gig based on the appropriateness of that scenario, you know? So anyway, long story short, I could talk about JP and his abilities and how great of a guy he is all day. I love JP.
I hear you.
But he killed it, man. Like I was so lucky to be able to have him step in a matter of like 24 hours and learn the songs and crush it. And not many people could do that. So it says a lot about him. He's killer. He's a great 100%. Player. Yeah.
Yeah, man. With all the touring that you've done throughout the years with Periphery and everything else that you have going on, I imagine the balance of keeping home life and family life and everything else with touring, that is something that is always hard. And it sounds like you've been able to sustain yourself with all things drumming related, touring related, to where that is just what you do. But it's still a balance of getting home and reacclimating to that life and doing everything else and being present and everything. So I imagine that's been a process of the balance of it all.
Yeah. You know, some tours are harder than others depending on where we're going and the time differences and how grueling it is. And, but I would say this, I mean, it's definitely an adjustment. The more you do it on both sides of the coin, meaning the more you go out on tour and do different tours, and then the more you come back from tours, the better you get at understanding what you need as a person to readjust to whatever that situation is. And for me, I typically need about 24 hours on both ends to adjust properly. It takes about 24 hours for me to really feel like I'm on tour and get into that lifestyle again. And then it takes about 24 hours for me to be back home and readjust to being home. And one of the hardest things for me is that, you know, in some ways I'm a workaholic. Like I work all the time. I very rarely have a day where I'm not doing some kind of work. And usually it's pretty extensive. And to force myself when I get home or when I go on tour to like give myself the breathing room to adjust, that's the hardest part for me mentally. So like, for example, at least for this last tour, the very first day, I don't teach that day. Right. I allow myself plenty of room and plenty of time and space to just get back into it, get to see everybody, get to talk to everybody, get the lay of the land, get the drums sounding good, get the sound checks right, get a feel for the schedule, get a feel for the show. I don't beat myself up about it, and then same thing when I get home. Yesterday was pretty much like, the past 2 days, I should say, were like the first 2 days back from the tour. So it took me, that 24-hour, 36 hours to really acclimate. And I had to force myself not to go to the gym, not to take lots of calls, not to be doing tons of work.
Right.
Just like spend time at home, sleep, hang out with the dogs, hang out with my wife. Don't do anything more than just like get used to your new surroundings. And it's hard to do that, man. It's hard for a lot of people. There's a thing that I'm very passionate about, at least respecting, I should say, which is post-tour depression, right? That a lot of people go through. I have a lot of friends that go through it. My coworkers when I'm on tour, my crew, people that I love, they tour so much that when they get home, it's like they hit a wall and they don't know what to do with themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So I spend a lot of time talking to friends about that, helping them adjust to that. I've had to spend a lot of time helping myself adjust to that because for a while I didn't know that I needed 24 hours. I would just try to like jump back into things and I would get sick or I would get depressed or I would get like bummed out. I would just do myself a disservice. So I know I'm rambling on about this, but bottom line is like touring is fantastic. It's so much fun to be in that lifestyle, to have that regimen, to be around your friends, to get to play shows. But it's a very fast-paced, grueling, in a new city every day, literally lifestyle. Whereas when you come home, you truly stop moving. And that abrupt transition can be really tough for people. And it was really tough for me. And it still is tough for me. That first 24 hours, dude, it's like, poof. I'm a zombie in some ways because I don't know how to act. I don't know what my wife expects of me. And she's great. She doesn't expect anything. It's my own weird, fucked up interpretation of what I should be doing as her husband who's now back from tour. Mm-hmm. All she wants me to do is sleep and like do nothing and unload my laundry so she can do it. And she wants to cook for me and she wants to just like make me fucking relax. And I won't do it half the time. So I've gotten better at just saying, okay, fine, you're right. I'm going to take 24 hours. I'm going to readjust. And it's funny because today I got back in the gym. I had a full work schedule. I had a ton of stuff going on and I feel good. I'm good. Like I'm now readjusted to being home. I know what I'm going to do tomorrow. My schedule is laid out and I feel good about it. But like I said, I keep extending the time from 24 to 36 to 48. But it really does. It takes like 24 to 48 hours of when I get home to adjust. And it takes me about 24 hours getting on a tour to adjust. And as long as I respect that, I'm good. And there is no need to worry about the balance because that amount of time really works for me,
Right. Hey, man, at least you got a formula for it. And as you said, it'll probably extend as you get older. But hey, at least you got a formula as your foundation.
I'm trying, dude. I'm working on it. That's for sure. Mental health and physical health is the most important thing. And when you're doing that kind of lifestyle, it can be challenging. It's definitely nowhere near the kind of challenge that people that go away on like, in the military or that go through traumatic experiences. It's not like that. But I think it is like a mind fuck to be going and going and going at a really fast pace. And then all of a sudden it all stops. It's like, okay, now what do we do with all that energy? What do you do with all that motion in your mind?
Right.
It can be intense. It can definitely be intense.
I hear you, man.
Yeah.
Well, getting into drumming for a second. How'd you get into drumming in the first place? And tell me a little bit about maybe your first kit and or any early influences that maybe were present in your formative years that still last to this day, because I know I certainly have mine.
Sure, yeah. I mean, I started really young. I was like, I don't know, 4, 5, 6, something like that. I don't even remember the exact age. But my parents, they saw that I had an inclination towards it. And they got me some like toy drum kits, like from like the mall that were made of paper that I broke.
Yeah.
And my very first kit was a Ludwig 5-piece red drum set. It had the tom arms that connected to the bass drum. I'm pretty sure it had the tom arms that connected to the bass drum. I might be thinking of my next kit, but either way, yeah, it was sick, man. I took lessons from a young age. I had some great teachers that got me started on the right path. And then pretty soon after that, I started playing pearl drums because I was obsessed with Dennis Chambers, who lives in the same county as me. He's
Right.
a little bit further away now, but when I was growing up, I lived like 10 minutes away from Dennis.
Wow.
So Dennis was a massive influence to me at a young age. He's still a massive influence to me now. So I started playing Pearl kits back then. I had a Pearl export kit, then I had a Pearl Masters custom kit. I love Neil Peart. I grew up listening to Rush. I grew up listening to Dream Theater. A lot of the rock guys. But then I had teachers that exposed me to guys like Vinnie Colaiuta and Tony Williams and Jojo Mayer. I'm just thinking of like key players that really affected me at a young age. Steve Smith.
Right.
All these guys from a very young age helped to sort of give me I think a well-rounded example of what's possible out there. And then I just kind of ran with my interests and went from there. But yeah, I mean, ever since I started playing at 5 or 6 years old, dude, I haven't been able to stop. And I'm 36 years old now. So it's been 30 years or so that I've been playing drums, which is pretty nuts.
Yeah, man, it's one of the things that I've mentioned in previous interviews when I think about the guys that I studied with. There was a guy in particular that I went through a lot of like Afro-Cuban kind of independence with. And I remember at the time learning all this stuff and thinking, I don't know if I'm ever going to play like Latin music or in an Afro-Caribbean-esque band of any kind. And I hope this isn't just a complete waste of time. But I found out later as I got in sort of more progressive scenarios that some of those exercises and learning some of that stuff kind of started to naturally permeate my playing.
Yeah.
So it really wasn't a waste of time. It just sort of took some time to naturally present itself via osmosis or however the hell it happened. So I guess asking you, have you had sort of any situation like that was kind of a light bulb moment where you thought, you know what, I think I'm really onto something here as a drummer?
Yeah, it was. I mean, I had a few of those, but I think the real first one was with one of my teachers where he said to me, there's 2 ways that you should be learning songs. The first way is based on what the drummer played, right? Like what does the drummer play in this song that you're listening to, and being able to learn that part verbatim so that you can be a good potential session drummer. And then the second was learning how to craft my own interpretation of it. But what he taught me, and this is the key, was in either scenario, the first thing that you have to learn are the melodies and the music and the intention and the lyrics and the vocal parts and every other aspect except the drums, so that you then understand why the drummer played what they played, and then also know the music so well that you can then develop your own parts that will fit the music perfectly if you have another interpretation than what the drummer played. And that was like a massive, I mean, I apply that every single day today, in whatever I'm doing. So yeah, man, I mean, that was a big one. And then I had another teacher who really worked with me on understanding dynamics and control and ghost notes and the difference between using the molar stroke versus using other kinds of like more barbaric strokes with the hands. That was life-changing as well. So yeah, man, I mean, throughout the career there have been a number of those kinds of moments that have just like shaped what I do now, for sure.
Well, here's a question for a band in Periphery that often kind of gets associated with the whole like gent, like sub category or genre or whatever. I'm just curious what your thoughts are on the progenitors of it all, really, in Meshuggah, because I know every time I see that band live, I'm just like, my God, this band is just fucking destroying right now. It's ridiculous.
Oh yeah, I mean, dude, they're one of the greatest live bands of all time.
Yeah, for real.
And I mean, for what they do, there's no one better. They're so tight. They're so good at it. They know exactly who they are, exactly what they're trying to do. You know, it's funny. I don't know if you listen to Bill Burr's podcast at all, but
yeah, I love it.
He did a whole episode, or at least a whole bit on his episode about going to see Meshuggah and how it's pretty much life changing. And I have to echo his sentiments here, which is like, if anyone, no matter what style of music you like, ever has the chance to go see Meshuggah live, they should.
Yeah. Because
it is a truly visceral, sensory experience that you can't not enjoy. It's awesome.
Yeah.
And what's funny, you know, if I'm being completely honest, is like, I never really grew up listening to Meshuggah.
Right.
I got more into them when I joined Periphery, but it still didn't fully make sense to me until I saw it live. And then I was like, oh, okay, there we go. Got it. Yeah.
Yeah. 100%. Well, lastly, man, I think you and Chad Smith of the Red Hot Chili Peppers appear to be tied for the baseball cap collection.
Yep, I get
but
it all the
I'm
time.
curious. Yeah, I'm curious how many V-neck T-shirts you have, because I've noticed you tend to wear those, and I even noticed when JP sat in for you in Periphery, he even made it a point to wear a V-neck T-shirt. So, how many do you have at this point, would you say?
Well, I just ordered 10 more of the white V-necks because. So here's the thing, dude. I mean, I have a ton. I don't wear crew neck tees.
Yeah.
Wearing a turtleneck would be like my own personal hell. I don't like any pressure on my neck for some reason. It's weird. There's no reason why.
Yeah.
It's just uncomfortable to me.
Yeah.
But when I go on tour, this might sound really wasteful. I just like, dude, I sweat so fucking much when I play.
Of course.
And typically there isn't we don't have like a wardrobe with us half the time. And like, you know, you get on the bus and then you let the clothes dry and it stinks every night and it's filled with sweat. And even if you wanted to wash it every show in a sink, it's still soaking wet. So, for years I've been tossing my shirts. I wear them for a show or two. I toss it. I got a new one. And then like towards the end of tour, I order however many that I've thrown away. I order more. Because I wear, you know, fucking cheap V-neck T-shirts, nothing expensive. So it ends up costing me like $50 or something for 10 shirts, which is pretty damn good, you know? And I'd rather toss them and not fucking, you know, make everybody in my band hate me because I smell so bad. And just buy new ones than, you know, than have them just rotting in the tour bus. It's just not good. So that's 100%. My secret with the V-neck. So yeah, at any given time I have at least 10, but dude, I mean, who knows? I probably have 30 V-necks in my closet right now, in my drawer, all different colors. And I'm the proponent of V-necks and backwards Orioles baseball hats and Ravens football hats.
There you go.
Yeah. So there you go.
Right on, man.
Yeah.
Well, Matt, it was good talking to you. Congrats on Hail Stan.
Thank you.
And of course, best of luck for the hustle of 2020. I'm sure you got no shortage of all sorts of things happening.
Oh yeah, it's going to be a good year, man. We're just getting it underway, but yeah, I'm stoked. We have a lot of good stuff coming up. Periphery is going to be in Europe in June. We got some other stuff that we're talking about for the rest of the year. Got some good stuff with Get Good Drums, the drum sample company coming up. So we'll be busy, and that's busy is good. Busy is good. So yeah, man, I wish you the best too, and I hope people have enjoyed hearing me and my shot sick voice throughout this whole episode. I apologize if I sound like I'm dying, because I am.
Right on, man. Thanks again, brother.
Yeah, thanks, man. I appreciate it. Talk to you soon.
All right, everybody, thanks for tuning in. Thanks to Matt for rapping head cold and all. Better a little snot than no talk at all. And still quite lucid after it all. Got some shit rhyming in there. All things considered went well. Stay tuned for the next one, and we'll catch you up on it. Crash, bang, boom.